Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top laners for patch 6.3. First up on my list for this patch is going to be Fiora. So Fiora is one of the strongest dueling top lane champions in the game. When you are playing her, make sure you do go aggressive in the early game, because if you can pick up a few kills with Fiora in the laning phase, you can end up snowballing the game out of control. You'll see in the background gameplay here, guys, I went like 13-1 or 13-2, and that was only because I was able to get a few kills on the Aatrox, and then once we started team fighting, I was a few items up on all of the opponents. So I just put out so much damage in team fights, and I was able to pretty much single-handedly carry the team fights because I was dealing so much damage. So just make sure you do go aggressive, try to get some kills in the early game as Fiora, because you're pretty much unstoppable if you do get a few items up on your opponents. She's pretty good at all stages of the game as well. She really doesn't fall off late game, and her early game is really good too. She does have that AoE heal with her ultimate, which is so strong for team fighting if you can end up proccing it. She does have the low cooldown dash with her Q, which just allows her to chase down her targets, or it allows her to escape ganks in the early game. It's just an overall really strong ability. She does have really good sticking power too, which makes her just a really strong split pushing champion, because if you do get ahead with Fiora, you can just split push, and then if the enemies do come up to try to get any CS, you can just jump on them with your Q, you can use your E, you'll get the slow, and then you can also get another slow with your W. So she's just a really good dueling and split pushing champion. And a few cons to Fiora though are that she is pretty weak if she does fall behind, since she doesn't provide any strong AoE damage or AoE CC in team fights, and she also can get kited in team fights if her Q is on cooldown. Next on my list is going to be Poppy. So Poppy is also another very easy pick in my opinion. She really doesn't take too much skill to play, which makes her a great pick for solo queue. She's got very low cooldown abilities. Her Q and her E are both really short if you get 40% CDR, so you can just spam those out in team fights and get a lot of damage off that way. She does have really high base damage on both of those abilities too, so when I'm playing Poppy, I only like to build maybe one damage item, and then after that, I just go full tank, and you'll still find yourself dealing a lot of damage in team fights. She's got relatively strong CC too with her E and her ultimate, and her disengage is some of the best, if not the best, in the game with her ultimate. The movement speed that she gets with her W, as well as the resist, just allows her to escape ganks really easily, and it does allow her to engage nicely in mid to late game team fights. And one con to Poppy though is that she does not have a gap closer, so you do have to be careful about whether or not you're pushing out in the early game. If you are going to push out to the enemy's tower, make sure you do ward, because you're a pretty easy gank target if you do not do so. Next up on my list, I have Kayle. So right now, I think that Kayle is quite underrated for solo queue. We're seeing a lot of assassins being played in both the mid lane and in the jungle. For mid, I've been seeing a lot of Talon and Zed recently due to the new AD assassin item being introduced, and in the jungle, I've been seeing a lot of Nidalee and Fizz because of runic echoes. So Kayle's just a great pick against those champions, since she does have her ultimate, which counters their burst damage pretty hard. She is also great in any melee matchup in the top lane, and we are seeing a lot of melee top laners being played. She can just CS really easily against those champions, and she can also bully them out of lane pretty easily too. She's got her heal with her W, which just allows her to sustain up really nicely in the laning phase, and once you do get a bunch of AP on Kayle, your heal does start to do quite a bit, so you can keep your teammates nice and healthy in those mid to late game team fights. She is also a very strong split pushing champion if she does get ahead, since she does have great wave clear with her E. And she does have a pretty insane late game too. Once you do get max build on Kayle, you just start to do so much damage, and you're just really hard to kill too due to your ultimate. One con to Kayle though is that she is a pretty easy gank target in the early game, since she does not have a gap closer. Next on my list, I have Quinn. So Quinn is similar to Kayle in the sense that she is a ranged champion, so she does really well against any melee matchup in the top lane. Her Q just allows her to duel those champions really easily. If she does hit that when she is going for a duel, then she's pretty much guaranteed to win the trade, since if the enemy tries to run at her, what she can do is she can use her E, and she'll gain that distance, and it will also slow them, so it's just really hard to duel a good Quinn in the laning phase. Her ultimate is also so strong for solo queue, and this is is one of the main reasons why I think she's such a good pick. If you do get ahead as Quinn, you can roam so easily because of the movement speed you get with your ult, so just make sure you do that when you are playing as Quinn. Don't sit in the top lane if you have taken the enemy's tower, or if you see like an opportunity to go for an easy roam mid or bot lane. If the bot lane's pushed out really far, just go for it, because you can end up snowballing the game really hard, and you can just win the game before the 20-minute point if you are playing Quinn. A few cons to her though is that she doesn't scale as well into the late game as some of the other top laners, and she also does not have a gap closer either, so you do have to be careful that you aren't pushing out too far in the laning phase. And to round out my top 5 for this patch, I have Malphite. So overall, Malphite is just a really strong pick for solo queue, since he does have that great pick potential with his ultimate. If the enemy team does lock in a mobile champion in either the mid lane or for AD carry, definitely look to pick Malphite, since if they make the slightest positional error in a team fight, you can just punish that so hard with your ult. It's such an easy ability to use, but if you can get that off on either the high priority target or on multiple targets in a team fight, you could just single-handedly end up winning your team the team fight and then just end up winning your team the game. He is also a great pick if the enemy team does have a heavy AD composition, since what Malphite can do is he can build full armor, and then the more armor that you get as Malphite, the more damage your E is going to do. So you're going to be super tanky, but you're still going to do quite a bit of damage as well. He is also a pretty good all-in champion. Like at level 6, you can surprise your opponents pretty easily with the amount of damage that you're going to do. If I am up against an AD champion in the top lane, I'll build an Iceborne Gauntlet first, and at level 6, I'll just go for an all-in. I'll poke them down a little bit with my Q first, and once they're at around half HP, you can just all-in them so easily, and they won't expect the damage output that you do have with your full combo. A few cons to Mal though are that he is a pretty easy gank target in the early game, which is a common con to most of these champions on my list, and he does also have pretty high mana costs in the early game. First up on the honorable mentions, I have Nasus. So Nasus is a great pick if you can find the right matchup. Unless you're really confident in your Nasus, then I wouldn't recommend blind picking him, since he does have quite a few good counters in the top lane, like Renekton, Kayle, Quinn. They all do pretty well against him. However, if you can find the right matchup as him, you can just stack your Q really easily, and then once it does get to mid to late game, you can end up 2-shotting or 3-shotting the enemy squishy. So he's a great pick, but I wouldn't recommend blind picking him unless you are very confident in your Nasus. Next on my list, I have Trundle. So Trundle isn't as strong as he was before. His ultimate did get nerfed, and his Q also got nerfed, so it doesn't work on towers anymore. So I do think he is still a pretty good pick. I wouldn't pick him though unless the enemy team does have a tank champion, since if they don't have a tank, you're not going to be able to steal the enemy's RvzStealth, and therefore you're not going to be as tanky as you could be in those mid to late game team fights. He is a really good dueling champion at level 6 though, due to his ultimate, so pick him if the enemy team does have a tank, but if they don't, then I would just recommend picking one of the other top laners. Next up, I have Mundo. So Mundo is still a very strong pick for solo queue. If your team does lack a tank, then definitely still look to pick him. His win rate did take quite a bit of a drop though after he did get nerfed. His ultimate and his E are two abilities that got nerfed, so he isn't as good as he was before, but if your team is lacking a tank, then I would still pick him for sure. Next, I have Wukong. So Wukong is your really good mid-game teamfight champion. Once you get rank 2 in your ultimate, it starts to do a lot of damage. Rank 1 on Wukong's ultimate does like 20 base damage, and rank 2 on it, it's something like 200 or 300. So he gains a really big power spike once he does hit rank 2 in his ult. So make sure that you do tell your team to group up once you do get that, and just look to go for teamfight, since he is one of the stronger teamfighting champions in the game. Next up, I have Gangplank. So Gangplank is also a great teamfight top lane champion. His ultimate is just such a strong ability, and I wasn't really surprised that it did get nerfed last patch. It did get a cooldown increase on it, but I do think that he is still a really good pick for solo queue if you know what you're doing on him. His ultimate can completely just change a game if you can get a good one, like say down bot lane. If your team starts fighting the enemy laners, then you can just sauce an ult down there, and you can just end up winning your bot lane that team fight by getting a good placed ultimate off. So I think that if you can play Gangplank correctly, he is a great pick for solo queue. And to round out the honorable mentions for this patch, I have Riven. So Riven is a very snowballing top lane champion. You do have to make sure you have a strong early game as Riven, or else you will get outscaled by some of the other top laners in the game. I would say play her if you know what you're doing on her, but if you haven't played her a lot, then I would recommend playing her in normals before heading into ranked, since she is a little bit harder to play than some of the other top laners. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. If you did enjoy, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.